Most vegetables give you one harvest. You plant them, you wait, you pick, and then it's over. The pot sits empty, the season moves on, and you're left starting from scratch all over again. But if you live in an apartment, on a balcony, or in a small city home with barely any outdoor space, that kind of gardening doesn't make sense. You don't have room to waste on a plant that gives you one salad and quits. That's why today we're doing something different. We're counting down 15 container vegetables that you plant only once, and then harvest again and again for weeks, sometimes months, from the exact same pot. No replanting, no wasted space, just container after container quietly working overtime while you go about your busy life. And stay until the end, because the number one vegetable on this list is so relentless that many city gardeners are still harvesting from it long after every other plant on their balcony has already given up. Here's the thing most people never realize about city gardening. You don't need a backyard. You don't need raised beds or acres of soil. You need a handful of pots and the right vegetables in them, plants that were basically built to keep giving instead of quitting after one round. That's the entire idea behind this list. Every crop we're about to cover can live happily on a windowsill, a balcony railing, a rooftop corner, or even a sunny spot right next to your front door. So if you've ever assumed that growing your own food requires more space than a city apartment can offer, this list is about to change your mind. Let's get into it. Kicking off our countdown at number 15, chives. Chives are the crop busy people don't even realize they're capable of growing until they try it once. There's no complicated care routine here, no special soil mix, no obsessive watering schedule. You plant it once in a small pot, set it near a window that gets a few hours of sun, and it simply keeps going. The harvesting method is almost too easy. You snip the green stalks close to the base, leave the roots untouched, and within days new shoots are already pushing back up. It's one of the few plants in the world that seems to regrow faster than you can use it. For city dwellers, chives are perfect because they take up almost no space. A single small container on a windowsill can supply a household with fresh chives for months, and because the flavor is so concentrated, you never need much at once. A few snips over eggs, soups, baked potatoes, or salads is usually enough. Unlike vegetables that demand a full-sized planter and hours of maintenance, chives thrive on neglect. Forget to water them for a couple of days, and they barely notice. That kind of resilience is exactly what busy city gardeners need. Plant it once, forget about it most of the time, and it keeps rewarding you anyway. Hoon, 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 hoom, hoon, hoom, hoon, hoon, hoon. If there's one vegetable that proves you don't even need a garden to grow your own food, it's green onions. Most city dwellers don't start these from seed at all. They simply save the root ends from store-bought green onions, place them in a small cup of water on the kitchen counter, and within days, fresh green shoots appear. Once those roots are transferred into a container with soil, the real magic begins. Instead of pulling the whole plant, you trim the tops and leave the base in place. New growth emerges again, then again, then again. It's a cycle that can continue for months from something that would otherwise have been thrown in the trash. Green onions also make incredible use of vertical space, which matters enormously for balcony and apartment growers. Because they grow upward rather than outward, a single narrow pot can hold a dozen or more plants at once, turning a tiny footprint into a steady supply of fresh onions. They also show up constantly in everyday cooking. Stir-fries, noodles, soups, rice bowls, omelets. Having a pot of green onions within arm's reach means you rarely have to buy them again. For anyone new to growing food in a small space, this is often the crop that proves it's actually possible. At number 13, bok choy. Bok choy tends to surprise container gardeners because most people assume leafy Asian greens need a full garden bed to thrive. In reality, bok choy is one of the best cut and come-again vegetables you can grow in a pot on a city balcony. Instead of harvesting the entire head at once, you can simply remove the outer leaves as they mature and let the center of the plant continue developing. New leaves fill in the gap within days, and the harvest cycle repeats itself for weeks. Bok choy also grows quickly, often reaching a harvestable size within a month of planting. That fast turnaround keeps busy gardeners engaged, since they don't have to wait long to see real results. And because the plant has a relatively shallow root system, it adapts well to medium-sized containers that fit easily on a balcony railing or windowsill. Another advantage is temperature flexibility. Bok choy tolerates cooler weather better than many other greens, which means container gardeners in apartments can often extend their harvest well into the shoulder seasons simply by moving the pot to a sheltered spot. For a vegetable that's expensive and hard to find fresh in many grocery stores, growing your own in a single container is a quiet win. At number 12, arugula. Arugula might be the most productive green you can grow for the amount of effort it requires. It germinates fast, grows fast, and recovers from cutting faster than almost anything else on this list. Under decent conditions, you can be harvesting baby arugula leaves in as little as 3 weeks. That's an incredibly short wait for a city gardener who wants quick, tangible results. And the more frequently you cut it, the more aggressively it seems to grow back, almost as if harvesting sends a signal to keep producing. Containers actually work in arugula's favor. They allow tighter control over soil moisture, which matters because arugula can turn bitter if it dries out too often, something that happens easily in traditional garden beds but is far easier to manage in a pot you can check daily. Its peppery flavor also makes it valuable in the kitchen. A small handful elevates a plain sandwich, tops a pizza beautifully, or adds punch to an otherwise simple salad. Because a little goes a long way, one modest container can realistically supply a household with fresh greens for weeks without ever running dry. At number 11, lettuce. Most people think of lettuce as a one-time harvest, and that's usually because they're harvesting it the wrong way. Instead of cutting the entire head at once, container gardeners get far more value by trimming the outer leaves and letting the center keep growing. This cut-and-come-again approach can stretch a single lettuce planting into 6 to 8 weeks of continuous harvests, sometimes longer if the weather stays mild. For someone living in a city apartment with limited outdoor space, that kind of return from one small pot is hard to beat. One of the biggest advantages containers offer lettuce is mobility. As the weather heats up, you can simply move the pot into a shadier spot to prevent the plant from bolting and turning bitter. That flexibility alone often extends the harvest far longer than what's possible in a fixed garden bed. Lettuce also grows quickly, with many varieties producing harvestable leaves within a month. For city dwellers who want the satisfaction of walking a few steps, snipping fresh greens, and having a salad ready in minutes, few vegetables make homegrown food feel this effortless. At number 10, celery. Celery has a reputation for being difficult, but what most people don't realize is that it's actually one of the better continuous harvest vegetables for container gardening. Rather than pulling the whole plant at once, you harvest the outer stalks and leave the center intact, allowing new growth to emerge from the middle over and over again. Because celery prefers consistently moist, nutrient-rich soil, it often performs better in a container than in the ground, simply because a pot makes it far easier to maintain those exact conditions. City gardeners who check their plants daily are already perfectly positioned to give celery what it wants. It also shows up constantly in everyday cooking. Soups, stocks, stir-fries, and salads all rely on celery, and having a steady stock supply nearby means never buying a full bunch just to use 2 ribs. Once established, a single container can quietly keep producing usable stocks for much of the growing season, making it a surprisingly efficient choice for a small kitchen garden. At number 9, mint. Mint might be the single most productive plant on this entire list, and city dwellers often discover that the challenge isn't getting it to grow, it's keeping up with how much it produces. Give it a container, a bit of sunlight, and occasional water, and it will reward you with months of non-stop growth. Every time you trim it, mint responds by growing back fuller and bushier than before. Some gardeners harvest mint weekly during the warmer months and still can't use it fast enough. That kind of overproduction is a good problem to have. Containers are actually essential for mint in most situations, since in open ground it spreads aggressively through underground runners and can quickly take over neighboring plants. Confined to a pot, all that same vigorous energy gets channeled into leaf growth instead. Fresh mint also has enormous everyday versatility. Tea, lemonade, fruit salads, desserts, sauces, and cocktails all benefit from a handful of freshly cut leaves. For a busy city dweller, a single pot of mint by the door can become one of the lowest effort, highest reward plants they've ever grown. At number 8, kale. Kale earns its spot on this list through sheer toughness. Heat, light frost, inconsistent watering. Kale tends to shrug off conditions that would stop many other leafy greens in their tracks, which makes it remarkably well suited to the unpredictable microclimates of a city balcony. The harvesting method mirrors several other crops on this countdown. You remove the lower, more mature leaves and leave the center of the plant to keep producing. New leaves fill in the gap, then more appear, and the cycle can continue for months from a single planting. Because kale can be expensive at grocery stores, especially organic varieties, growing it yourself in a container quietly adds up in savings over a season. A single well-maintained plant can produce dozens of harvestable leaves without ever needing to be replaced. For city dwellers trying to get the most food out of the smallest possible footprint, kale delivers consistently. At number 7, basil. Basil is one of those herbs that actually gets more productive the more aggressively you harvest it, which makes it perfect for anyone who cooks often. Most people underharvest basil, picking a leaf here and there and wondering why the plant never seems to grow much. The trick is to pinch the growing tips regularly, which forces the plant to branch out into multiple new stems. There's one important rule though. The moment you see a flower starting to form, remove it immediately. Letting basil flower signals the plant to stop producing new leaves, so keeping those buds pinched off is what keeps it in a constant state of growth. Containers suit basil extremely well because they warm up faster than garden soil and offer the kind of sharp drainage the plant prefers. Combine that with a sunny windowsill or balcony spot, and a single basil plant can keep a kitchen supplied with fresh leaves for pasta, pizza, salads, and sauces all season long. Few herbs reward regular use as generously as basil does. At number 6, Malabar spinach. For city dwellers dealing with intense summer heat, Malabar spinach solves a problem that regular spinach can't handle. While traditional spinach bolts and turns bitter as soon as temperatures climb, Malabar spinach is just getting started in those exact same conditions. It isn't true spinach at all, but a vigorous climbing vine that thrives on warmth and humidity. Give it a trellis or a simple support in a container, and it will climb aggressively, producing fresh leaves and tender shoots every few days throughout the hottest stretch of summer. The more you harvest it, the bushier and more productive it becomes, which means a single container with a sturdy support can keep producing fresh greens for months, right when most other leafy vegetables have completely stalled out. It also tolerates occasional neglect far better than delicate greens, which matters for anyone juggling a demanding schedule. While neighbors are struggling to keep lettuce alive in July, a Malabar spinach vine on the same balcony can be thriving. At number 5, bush beans. Bush beans are proof that a small, compact plant can still be a serious producer. Unlike pole beans, they don't need tall trellises or elaborate support systems, which makes them ideal for tight balconies and small patios where space is at a premium. The key to keeping bush beans productive is consistent harvesting. Every time you pick mature pods, the plant is triggered to keep flowering and setting new beans. Stop harvesting regularly, and production slows down noticeably. Keep at it, and the plant just keeps working. Containers actually give bush beans an edge because pots warm up faster than garden soil in spring, helping seeds germinate sooner and pushing the entire growing timeline earlier. That often translates into a longer overall harvest window by the time the season wraps up. A single medium-sized container can support several bush bean plants at once, and once they start producing, the pace can be surprising. For city dwellers who want a genuinely useful vegetable rather than just a decorative one, bush beans quietly deliver meal after meal from a very small footprint. At number 4, cherry tomatoes. If there's one vegetable that fully captures the idea of planting once and harvesting endlessly, it's the cherry tomato. Indeterminate varieties in particular keep growing, flowering, and setting fruit continuously until frost finally stops them, which for many city dwellers means months of non-stop harvesting from one plant. A single healthy plant can realistically produce hundreds of tomatoes before the season ends. New flowers keep appearing even while older fruit is ripening, so harvesting becomes an ongoing daily event rather than a single big picking day. Containers help maximize this by allowing gardeners to position the pot in the sunniest possible corner of a balcony or rooftop, something that's often harder to control in a traditional yard. Good drainage in a container also helps prevent the root issues that can slow production in heavier garden soil. There's a simple satisfaction in stepping outside and grabbing a handful of sun-warmed tomatoes straight off the vine. For busy people, that kind of instant, low-effort reward is exactly why cherry tomatoes remain one of the most popular container crops in cities everywhere. At number 3, peppers. Most people assume a pepper plant gives one big flush of fruit and then tapers off, but healthy peppers actually behave very differently. The more mature peppers you pick, the more energy the plant redirects into producing new flowers and new fruit. Harvesting essentially fuels more harvesting. Peppers also happen to love the exact conditions a container naturally provides. warm soil, sharp drainage, and a slightly restricted root zone are all things peppers appreciate, and all three occur more easily in a pot than in open ground. For city dwellers, the mobility of a container is a major bonus too. Pots can be repositioned to chase the sun throughout the day, moved to shelter during a sudden storm, or shifted closer to a wall for warmth as the season cools down in fall. That flexibility can meaningfully extend the harvest window. During peak summer, a well-tended pepper plant can seem almost tireless, setting fruit after fruit for months. Sweet peppers, jalapenos, and banana peppers all perform well in this setup, giving even a small balcony a genuinely varied and long-lasting harvest. At number 2, cucumbers. Cucumbers completely change how people think about space once they're grown vertically. Left to sprawl, a cucumber plant demands far more room than most city dwellers have to spare. But trained up a simple trellis or cage inside a container, the same plant becomes remarkably space-efficient while staying just as productive. Growing upward also improves airflow around the leaves, which helps reduce disease and makes the fruit far easier to spot and pick. Cucumbers follow a simple rule that rewards attentive gardeners: harvest regularly, and the plant keeps producing new flowers and fruit. Let cucumbers grow oversized on the vine, and production slows noticeably. Once a cucumber plant enters its productive stretch, new fruit can appear every few days, especially during warm weather. For a balcony or rooftop grower, a single trellised plant tucked into a large container can produce a genuinely substantial harvest while barely touching the actual floor space available. By midsummer, it's common for city gardeners to be surprised by just how many cucumbers one plant can turn out, especially when they keep the harvesting rhythm consistent. And now, taking the number 1 spot, Swiss chard. If there's one vegetable that perfectly sums up everything this list is about, it's Swiss chard. This is the ultimate cut-and-come-again crop, and it seems almost determined never to stop producing. Heat barely slows it down, light cold rarely bothers it, and every single harvest seems to trigger even more growth. The reason lies in how the plant is built. Instead of forming one central head that gets harvested all at once, Swiss chard continuously generates fresh new leaves from the center of the plant, while the older outer leaves mature and are ready to pick. You simply remove those outer leaves as needed, and the center keeps pushing out replacements over and over again. One healthy plant, grown in nothing more than a single well-sized container, can produce dozens, sometimes even hundreds, of harvestable leaves across a season. For a busy city dweller working with limited balcony or patio space, that is an extraordinary amount of food coming from one pot that never needed to be replanted. Swiss chard is also remarkably versatile in the kitchen. Young leaves work well raw in salads, while larger leaves can be sautéed, steamed, or folded into soups and pastas. And because it tolerates weather swings better than most leafy greens, the harvest window often stretches far longer than most first-time growers expect, sometimes lasting well into conditions that would have already killed off more delicate crops. Many container gardeners start growing Swiss chard almost as an afterthought, unsure what to expect. By the end of the season, it's often become their single most reliable plant, not because it's flashy or trendy, but simply because it refuses to stop giving. There's also something worth mentioning for city dwellers specifically. Swiss chard doesn't just tolerate a container, it genuinely seems to prefer the controlled environment one provides. Consistent watering is far easier to manage in a pot than in open ground, and because the plant has a relatively compact root system, even a medium-sized container on a balcony railing is enough to support months of continuous growth. Pair that with its striking stems, ruby red, golden yellow, or bright orange depending on the variety, and you end up with a plant that's as decorative as it is productive. It's not unusual for a single pot of Swiss chard to become the centerpiece of an entire balcony garden, simply because it looks as good as it performs. Wambwe. And that really is the theme running through this entire list. The most productive city gardens aren't the ones with the most space. They're the ones filled with plants that keep working long after a single harvest would have ended things elsewhere. If you live in an apartment, a small flat, or anywhere without a traditional backyard, you don't need more room to grow real food. You need the right plants, chosen specifically because they reward you again and again from the exact same container. Start with just 2 or 3 crops from today's list, whatever fits your balcony, your windowsill, or your rooftop, and you'll likely notice something surprising within a few weeks. Growing more food in a small city space was never really about planting more pots. It's about choosing the plants that simply refuse to stop producing. Think about what that actually means for someone with a busy schedule. You're not out there every weekend digging new beds, buying new seedlings, or starting from zero every month. You plant once, you water consistently, and you harvest on repeat, sometimes for the entire season, sometimes well beyond it. That's the real advantage these 15 crops offer city dwellers over almost anything else you could grow. Less repetition, less waste, and far more food coming back from the same small footprint you already have. And once you experience that first surprising harvest, whether it's a handful of cherry tomatoes warm from the sun or an armful of Swiss chard leaves that just keep regrowing, it tends to change how you look at every empty corner of your home. A bare windowsill stops looking bare. An unused balcony corner stops looking wasted. Suddenly, every sunny spot looks like an opportunity. If this list helped you rethink what's possible in a small space, let us know in the comments which container vegetable has kept producing the longest for you. And if you're ready to take things further, stick around, because up next we're looking at container vegetables that don't just keep producing, they grow so aggressively they can outgrow almost any pot you put them in.